All right, so here I am in my developer dashboard, and over here in the left nav, you'll see that there are two different entries related to search feeds. And so this one that I'm highlighting here is actually the search feed console itself. But before I show that to you, I want to actually just take a look at the search feed validator tool that I had just mentioned. So let me go ahead and click into that. And so for developers who've actually integrated into Roku Search before, I think this page and this tool should be very familiar to you. This page has been in the dashboard for a number of years now, and as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, what you do is drop in a feed URL, and you also provide it with a email endpoint where you would like to receive the results of the validation. And what this tool itself does is it basically does a one-time sort of on-demand validation of any feed URL endpoint that you give it. So when I press validate here, that validation job will run, and then 15 minutes later, I will be emailed the results of that validation. And this is a really useful tool while you're actually configuring the feed itself, as you can use this as many times as you need during that process until not only your feed is validated, but also you're seeing that the content within the feed, an acceptable number of that content is actually passing validation. And so once you are satisfied with the overall health of your feed, you can then switch over to submitting a new feed through the Search console. And to do that, let me just go back to the dashboard so I can sort of recenter you in terms of the site nav. And then I'll click over here into the Search feed console. Cool. And so this is the console. You'll see there are these two different displays within it. This one at the top here is where you would see any search feeds that you own that are on the 2.0 feed spec. And so that can either be search feeds that are already live in production or ones that you have submitted and are now going through the publishing and certification process for. And then down below, you'll see this section for all of your legacy search feeds as well. And basically, this section is really only read-only, but it is meant to give you sort of an inventory on any search feeds that are associated with your account for channels that are still following the 1.0 feed spec. And so again, while this is, I think, useful as an inventory, it does lack some core features that are now offered through 2.0, such as the ability to download your ingestion report after each index, and to do that on demand. So if you do want to be able to benefit from those features, you would have to update these feeds over to the 2.0 spec. And so in terms of how to update, let me go ahead and show you that. So to submit a new search feed, you would click on this new search feed button, and then you're taken to this submission form. And so you'll see there's a couple pieces of information you have to provide, and the first one is obviously just telling us what channel you're trying to associate this search feed with. And this dropdown will show you a selector where you can choose from any of your public published channels. So beta channels will not appear here, nor will unpublished channels. And so today I'll go ahead and select channel TV. And then again, I'll drop in a feed URL that I want to associate with this channel. And then here I need to provide two branded assets associated with the channel that appear throughout the on-device search UI. Mostly these appear on some older legacy devices, but nonetheless, you do need to still provide them. And so I'll just drop in these two assets. And then finally, again, I need to provide an email where I would like to receive results once they're available. And so I'll drop in my own email address and press submit. All right, cool. And so it was successful. So you can see here that the feed was successfully submitted and it now appears within this top panel. But you do see that the validation job is still running. And so you see this processing indicator. But you can also see that the status appears as submitted, which signals to you that the job is still running. And there are no initial results available yet. And so this validation job can take anywhere from about 30 seconds all the way up to 4 minutes for larger content feeds to complete. And so you have a couple options. You can either be patient and remain on this page and just refresh the page periodically until you see the results are available, or you can feel free to navigate away from this page and either come back to it, or you can wait to receive the email notification that the validation job has completed, which will provide a link back to this page. But in my case, it looks like the validation job completed rather quickly, which makes sense given this content feed only actually has 10 pieces of content within it. And so I see a couple things here. The first thing that I see is that the status tells me it is feed validated. And effectively what that means is that it complies with the Roku Search schema itself. And so the validation job was able to complete and get through the entire feed. However, over here under the validated content column, I can see that only 40% of the content was successfully indexed. And so historically, the overall feed health has kind of been a black box to partners. But I think a big part of the utility of this new search feed is that not only can you now see this ingestion success rate, but you can actually even click into it and you'll see that you have this option to download the error report itself. And by doing so, you're able to look at every single warning and error that occurred within the feed. So if we open the report, we can see some different information here about the content feed that was downloaded. And so you'll see there's 10 assets, but you'll also see that 6 of the content items were rejected. And you can look at each content ID and see the error message associated with them. In this case, it looks like each of these content items are missing episode info for those items. And so over here, I have actually 2 different versions of this feed. On the left is the feed that I submitted with the 6 content item errors. And on the right is a version that I've actually resolved. And I just want to show you what I'm referring to with those missing episode info. So if I scroll down here to these different IDs, you can see that on both feeds, I'm looking at content ID test episode 8. But in the resolved feed, you can see that I have this episode info bit of information, but you can see it was missing from the original feed that I submitted. And so why don't I take this new feed, sample fixed.json, and submit that through the Search Console. And so to do that, to resubmit, I'll simply click into the channel from the Search Console, and you'll see that it retained all of the information from my previous submission. And so in most cases, you'll presumably just fix the feed that's hosted at your endpoint. But in my case, for the purpose of this demo, I'll simply swap out that endpoint with the endpoint of the resolved feed. And I'll go ahead and press submit. And so you'll see that once again, the feed returns to a submitted status and that the job is now processing again on this feed. And so once again, we'll have to wait while that job finishes before we can look at our results. And if we fast forward a bit and refresh the page, I can see that actually now 100% of the content contained within the feed is successfully being validated, which is great. And I can click into that and I get this confetti and everything is happy. And so that's it. At this point, I can see that my feed is successfully being validated and also that all of the content within my feed is being indexed correctly. And so, of course, I'm happy with that level of content health in the feed. And the next step is going to be to reach out to Partner Success so that they can transfer to you a beta channel that will have been generated on your behalf. And what you'll need to do is install that channel on your account, on your device, so that you can query for content found within your feed and make sure that it deep links to the correct content within your channel. And so to tell you a little bit more about that next step in the process, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Raf Bredney.